Hello and welcome to the Sober Experience, formerly known as the Spiritual Experience, where we share stories of overcoming problematic situations in life through triumph and working together, as well as recovery topics and all other forms of spirituality, self-help, and the like. I'm your host, Jay Lewis, and here we go. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back. It's a Sober Experience. Hope you guys are doing well. And don't forget to like and subscribe on all podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, everywhere. You know where we are. You know who you are. All right. So I just want to thank everybody for their support. And this week we have a special guest, a guy that I've met in the last year. He's just coming around. He's doing seemingly well. But I'm interested to get to know him a little bit better today and introduce him to you guys. So everybody say hello to Eli. Eli, say hello.
Hello, everybody.
All right, Eli, first things first. Where are you from?
All right. I am from South Jersey. I was born in Atlantic City.
Yeah, we were just talking about this before the show, how like Atlantic City, for people who are on the East Coast, we've always been like, Atlantic City is like a little dirty, you know? Was it always like that?
My experience, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. You know, like we were talking about before, it's got a lot of history. It's gone through a lot of phases. You know, some people know it from gambling, which obviously is what it's famous for. Some people know it from, TV shows. We were talking about Boardwalk Empire. It used to be big in like the bootlegging scene. People know it from the beach, but it's a real place. I'll tell you that. It's not one of those fake places.
Right.
It's not like a resort. It's a real place.
Yeah.
Real people, and you see a lot of different types. I mean, it's always been an immigrant town. That's changed over the years, different waves of immigrants. So you see a lot of different mixes of people over there.
What was it like for you growing up there?
So Atlantic City, for those who don't know, it's on an island. It's on a barrier island right off, in South Jersey. And there's Atlantic City, and then there's a couple other towns, and there's the boardwalk. So it's a small place. So I'm actually from one of the other towns down the way. And you can really see, I think the first thing you notice is there's a lot of class differences. And that was an early education in America, I think. You got a lot of, again, you got the casino economy in Atlantic City. And you also have just like a lot of poverty. You got a lot of struggle there. You see a lot of broken lives. And then you have these beach towns, which are, people have second homes. There's there's like new money there. There's affluence there, and you just really feel that difference, as you move between the towns.
Yeah. So, what did your parents do?
So my father, speaking of real people, my father's a third generation furrier.
Nice.
He made fur coats. He's retired now, and he's around, which is great. So he was a third generation furrier in Atlantic. Atlantic City used to have for a place that's not that cold, there were a ton of furriers because, it was a place for people to like sport their luxury wear, on the boardwalk. And back in the day, that meant fur coats and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. You win a little bit of money. You got to look the part.
Yep.
Do you have siblings?
I do. I have a sister.
How old?
She is.
She older or younger
She's
than
older.
you?
She's 3.5 years older. I live in Brooklyn. She also lives in Brooklyn.
Really?
So it's awesome. Yeah, we're actually really close.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I appreciate that. So when you were in school, were you like, were you into sports? Were you just into studying? Or like what kind of kid were you?
No, I was...
creative?
I was a creative kid. I was... the thing about Atlantic City is what people may not realize is that, New Jersey, people have certain ideas about New Jersey, but South Jersey is actually pretty rural. And it's actually pretty, I don't know how you call it, but kind of backwoodsy in a lot of ways.
Right.
And so, I didn't really connect with a lot of the people I grew up. I think I was kind of, I might have been a bit of a self-described outcast a little bit. I didn't really connect with a lot of people I grew up with. They weren't terrible people. I just wasn't into stuff like that. I was, there were sports and stuff like that. I was kind of into it, but I was more into music, writing, and things like that. So there wasn't really much culture growing up down there. There was a college, and there was some cool stuff like that, but it wasn't really
creative.
It wasn't really, for stuff I was interested in. There wasn't really all that much to do.
Right. So when did like alcohol and that kind of stuff come into the picture? How old were you?
I was older. I was not an early. It's funny. No one in my family that I'm aware of had a problem with alcohol. I also didn't know a lot of my family because we were, unfortunately, a lot of my mother's side. We can get to this, but they were in the wrong place at the wrong time in Europe in the 30s and 40s. So we have a small family. So I don't know much about my family history there, but alcohol was not a part of my parents' lives. It wasn't a part of my life. I didn't even really start drinking seriously until I was in college and for real after college.
Right. Going back to what you were saying, like with your mom's family and stuff, did you grow up religious?
No. So we're Jewish.
Eli kind of gives it away.
Yeah, shockingly. Although it's funny, when I was a kid, now a lot of kids named Eli. I live in Park Slope, so every other kid is named Eli. I hear like moms yelling Eli. I think they're yelling at me, but they're yelling at some 3-year-old on the street.
Right.
But when I was a kid, it was the other thing. I had a weird name. It was a lot of teasing involved. But
right, and it's your full name.
Yeah. Oh yeah, it's just
yes, Eli. It's not like, all right, for the goy, like Eli would be short for Elijah.
Could be Elijah.
I have a lot of Elijah cousins. They're all Puerto Rican, right? And it was like, oh, there's little Eli. Yeah, but his name is like Elijah. His name isn't like Eli.
Yeah, it's Eli. Yeah, and with a Y. I don't know.
Right.
Why. I don't know why exactly. It's
yeah.
weird. So not even ELI, ELY.
So did you go to Hebrew school and all this other stuff?
I did all that stuff. Yeah, I think my parents, it's weird. They were not religious, but I think they wanted to be, which sounds weird. So they weren't like big temple goers, but there was like a Jewishness that was kind of there.
Like culturally.
Culturally, yeah. And I think they struggled with that. I think they wanted me to be more religious than they were. And they still sort of do. It's still a point of contention we have, what's Jewish enough for them.
Right.
Even though I'm Jewish, my wife's Jewish, my kids are being raised Jewish. I have 2 young daughters. But yeah, so, I went to Hebrew school, that kind of thing. I actually went to Hebrew day school up until 5th grade.
Right.
Which was odd.
What was that like?
The teachers were very strict. Like a lot of Israeli teachers. I learned a lot about the Israeli personality, and in retrospect, I appreciate it.
Right.
Because they were real people.
Rough.
They were rough. I think I was a little bit. Again, as I look to themes, I think I was a little disconnected from things. I learned the stuff around me. I did the work, but I didn't really connect with people. I was always sort of kind of mentally off in my own little.
Right, and this is
a little bit.
Is this self-imposed?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. So it's not like they're like, "Fuck you, Eli."
No. Even and they're like, I had friends, but even, and I had close friendships, but I think I just felt a little alienated from people, and then I cultivated that. That was part of the sort of the cliche I fell into. Like the disaffected, angsty kid. I think I played that up probably more than I needed to. But I think I sort of enjoyed and that of course played into my drinking.
Sure.
Because if you sort of romanticize solitude and being alone, you sort of are drawn to it,
Right.
And you find things that'll eventually push people away or put you in your own little world, your own little space. So it starts out as a place to escape from, and then you end up there more, longer than you want to be.
Yeah, and I also think. Being raised same way, that like when you go to shul, like if you don't have a chip on your shoulder when you show up, they'll put one. Mm-hmm. They're like, we can never forget. Yeah. And blah blah blah, and and not in a I wouldn't say a negative way, but I would say in a real way, because like your mom's family, like my dad's family generations ago, whatever, Jews were not being persecuted only during World War II.
Nope.
So like they have this thing about them where like, listen, you could never fully trust anybody. Mm-hmm. And even if they don't say it outright, and sometimes they do, it's that thing where just like, listen, we have to you have to protect something.
Yep.
You know, and it stays with you, because I know it would have, you know, same way I would protect my drinking.
Yep. There's always that feeling that the shit's going to go down.
Right. Exactly.
You're never fully safe wherever you are, whatever you're doing. I mean, with my folks, and it's funny, again, in sobriety, I think I'm spending a lot of time trying to connect with that attitude, whereas I used to be very dismissive of it. Again, it's easy growing up in, you know, 1980s America, New Jersey, you know, everything feels fine. You know, you can complain about what you complain about, but there were no Nazis walking around.
Right.
Now there are, but there weren't at the time. But you know, if it's in your history and if you have living reminders of it, you know, my grandmother, she was alive. You know, she was a Holocaust survivor. You know,
right.
On my mother's side, and she was a firsthand witness. And you know, it was a deep trauma. It was a generational trauma, and you know, you see echoes of that now. But yeah, you always feel a little bit unsafe. You're always looking around. You're always looking over your shoulder. There's always some fear that something is going to do something bad to you.
Right.
Know?
Yeah. That I also identify with. So you said you were doing great. You did good in school.
I did well in school. I mean, I can't say I was inspired by a lot of school. You know, I think I had maybe like a lot of people. There were some teachers I really connected with. You know, I was, like I said, I was into writing. I was into music, but that kind of came later. You know, where I grew up, you know, in the town I grew up, you know, there was a culture of, you know, of high achieving, you know, and an expectation of it, you know. And my sister, who's older, she was also a really good student. And so, yeah, like it was sort of expected that we were sort of plugged into schoolwork and doing the stuff there. It would have been considered, I guess, unacceptable to fuck up too bad.
Right.
At that stage.
So then you said you're in your late teens when you start drinking?
Yeah, so I go off to college.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Rutgers.
Wow.
It's funny.
Stayed in Jersey.
It was funny. My whole thing was like, whatever I do, I'm going to leave New Jersey, and I ended up going to Rutgers. But it was fine. It was great. It was the best of both worlds. I mean, it wasn't, you know, a lot of fancy schools are kind of a racket.
It's a great school.
It's a great school. I like that it's a state school. I like that it's inclusive. It, you know, a lot, you know, huge student population. And I think of it as like a tree. It had rings, you know. There was like, you know, at the time it was just sort of becoming like a sports school. I know now it's like a big sports school. When I went there, it was like kind of a joke from a sports perspective. Like the teams were always terrible.
Right.
So like the athletic stuff wasn't like a professional athletic kind of school. But, you know, the inner ring, you know, had like really high standard, you know, academics if you wanted to, you know, it had nationally known professors and all that. And it just had a cool culture overall. And it was, you know, it wasn't crazy expensive, which I appreciated. So, yeah, I started to find my people. I drank a little bit. I didn't drink steadily at all. I remember the first few times I drank, you know, I think I drank disgusting shit. I threw up, felt terrible, and I'm like, oh, that's not for me. So it wasn't even a habit I got into. I did pick up a smoking habit, and I realized that I'm the kind of person who, when I develop a habit, I'm very loyal to it.
Right.
I'm good at it, you know? So I became a good smoker. I had a really good smoking career. I've since quit. And I smoked a lot of pot. That was kind of my thing. Again, like I was hanging around creative people, fun people, you know.
You were in the groove.
I was in the
it's
groove.
Like, yeah, and plus you're a young person.
It wasn't fucking up my life. So
that's what I mean, in the sense where it's just like, look, even if you got like a ticket or two for open container or like this, it's like slap on the wrist trouble. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you're at school with other people that like, okay, now you're finally connecting with other people.
Yeah.
This is like a little bit of a lubricant.
I was surprised that it wasn't messing me up. And I think
right.
that's what reinforced it, that I could do that. I was like, well, I can smoke weed. After I finish this paper, I can smoke and hang out with everybody, play music, see shows, do whatever. And it was fine.
What kind of music did you play?
I think it was considered avant-garde music. I actually have some tapes of it. It's kind of unlistenable these days. But yeah, I was into a lot of jazz. I was into just a lot of experimental music.
What instrument do you play?
I play drums. I probably should have said that earlier. Yeah, I play drums, percussion. And yeah, I mean, like we were just really into out stuff, out music. So, you know, we played for other musicians. That basically means you play for other musicians.
Right.
You don't play for actual people.
That's
you know?
funny.
But again, it was great. You know, we would come into the city, we would see stuff, we would see, music that we were into, and there was a lack of consequences. I think that might be the big thing, and it was all very compartmentalized. I think that was something I realized I was good at. Like I could smoke, and drinking came up a little bit, but it was always in a way that didn't mess up, my whatever I was, my life project, whatever, like my school and just life.
Like it wasn't apparent. Like your parents weren't like, dude, you fucking smoking crazy.
Nah. I used to lie to them about smoking cigarettes, which is ridiculous because if you've ever hung around someone who smoked cigarettes,
you smell like an ashtray.
You smell like an ashtray.
Right.
And this is back in the day when you could smoke everywhere. So
right.
there were no, it wasn't like you couldn't smoke in bars, you couldn't smoke in whatever. So yeah, I mean everything smelled like cigarettes. But I think when you're that age, you're convinced that you can get away with stuff. But yeah, it was everything seemed fine. Everything seemed fine.
What was it like when you got out of school?
Got out of school. The day I graduated, I came right to Brooklyn. I moved in with some bandmates who had actually graduated earlier, so they were already settled.
What year is this?
This is 1999. Yeah. So moved to downtown Brooklyn. Things were a lot cheaper back then.
It was a different place.
I think our rent was like $300 a month or something crazy like that for 3 people in a decent apartment. And we could play, we could play music there. I didn't have a job, and that was okay. I felt like, I had an English degree, which basically prepares you to do nothing and everything, as we sometimes say. But so I spent the first kind of like few months just kind of not doing too much, honestly, playing music, kind of just feeling around the city. And again, that was fine. Like no consequences were there. I started to drink a little bit more then at that time. Alcohol started to come into my life a little bit. But again, it was in places and in ways that didn't seem catastrophic. I wasn't driving drunk. I wasn't, I wasn't drinking first thing in the morning. It was just something you do in your spare time, or something I did in my spare time.
Yeah. So what happens next?
Get a job. I fell into a job. It actually is the job I stayed with. I fell into advertising, which for all you people who do creative writing is actually a pretty good career path. So I became a writer at an ad agency, and at first it was just a job. It wasn't a job I was committed to, and I was like, well, I could do this and live life, and it'll be a thing. And gradually it just became, I realized I was pretty good at it. I learned the ropes. I had some good mentors, and it became a career.
What was the environment like at work?
Drinking. There's a lot of drinking. What people say about advertising, it's true. I mean, I think a lot of people think about like Mad Men and stuff like that.
Yeah.
People forget also that Mad Men was a show about unhappiness.
Yeah.
About misery, and also about alcoholism in a lot of ways.
A little bit.
A little bit, yeah. And people using alcohol to not deal with things. And that also took place at a time when people just didn't talk about stuff. But in seriousness, you could, it was the kind of thing where you could drink in a way that suited me. You could drink at work a little bit, you could drink as the day would begin to end, people would start to, someone would invite you into their office, your boss would invite you in at like 4:30. Have a drink, have a glass of whiskey. And that was fine, It was the environment was positive, and unless
it's like part of the culture.
It was part of the culture.
Right.
If you could give the impression that you had your shit together, you weren't falling on the floor, then it was fine.
Now, did you see people that were like not having it together?
Yeah, I started to see that. It's funny, they would just kind of disappear. I started to notice that some people, you would notice that they were kind of just, a little, they would have a little too much at lunch. And then after a while, they would you'd stop seeing them around, and you didn't really know what happened to them. Did they get fired? Did they,
How big was the agency? Was it like a big one?
It was a big one, and the funny thing is, it was like a niche field. It was like, so I work in medical advertising, and this is in the days before before people knew about that stuff. They weren't like, this is before like every commercial on TV was for a drug.
Right.
So this is like no one really knew about this field. I didn't know this field existed. And it, just the nicheness of it, I kind of liked. It wasn't like, oh, we're working on cars, we're working on, glammy stuff. We were working on drugs. So there was something kind of just cool about it, that it seemed like kind of fringy at the time, you know. I don't know if that's really the word. You know, now it's become a little more integrated into just the rest of the advertising world. And you see these like advertising hotshots, but you know, you had like, it was like a little more of like a science nerdy kind of contingent to it.
Right. Where like, no offense to you, when I see these ads on TV, I'm like, this is crazy. You know, the lady
every side effect in the
doing
world.
cartwheels on the fucking beach and is having the happiest day of her life and all this other. I'm like, dude, what is this? What is this commercial even for?
Well, you have to do
and
all
then,
that, unfortunately.
And then like 2/3 of the way through, they're like, yeah, because I take blah, 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 whatever the pill is. I'm like, holy shit. And then, you know, whatever, they list the side effects, which are the funniest part of the ads, but that's like the necessary part, right?
It's all legal. Yep.
Right, of course. In our day, I mean, these kids are, whoever's listening, depending on how old you are. But you and I are about the same. How old are you?
46.
Right, I'm 44. So we, in our day, friends, ads would be on the actual radio. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of each ad, you would hear blah, 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 and it was just like
an auctioneer talking.
Right, but it didn't even sound like English because they just legally had to have it there. Yeah. So they would save like the last, 2.8 seconds just for that paragraph of whatever. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So, so that whole shit that's at the end of these crazy ads on TV used to be on the radio.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
I
wild.
remember those days. And it did kind of take a little bit of the like I said, like the hot shotness out of it, you know.
Right.
It was, you could only be so cool when you had to find time for all that stuff, you know.
Yeah. So you're progressing, you're seeing around you that things for other people, but you're still separate. You're like, that's them, that's not me.
You know, it's funny. I don't know when I started. I'm thinking about your question. I don't even know when I started really drinking. All I know is that once I did, it was every day. And that sounds, I didn't know that was weird. I didn't know that was unusual, that
right. Were you still smoking pot all the time?
No, that's the thing. Like once I started working and it was like a corporate job, and I kind of, that's the other thing. I sort of appreciated at the time, again, still thinking of myself as kind of this like outsider. I kind of like the idea of like, I'm working in this corporate job, but I'm not really like that. I'm kind of just this like, whatever, I'm out of my element. I don't belong here, and I kind of like that. But it did dawn on me that like pot was not conducive to that world.
Yeah, they don't want anybody walking around stoned.
Well, this is before also it became acceptable.
Right.
It was like that was fringy. That was like, ooh, you do drugs.
Yeah.
Even though everyone smoked weed, it wasn't talked about. It wasn't at work.
Right.
Drinking was for work, was for drinking, wasn't for
exactly.
For weed.
And that was like, when I worked in finance, it was the same thing.
Yeah.
They're like, dude, you smoking weed? You trying to go broke?
Yeah.
Come have some vodka.
Yeah.
Or some cocaine.
Or what are you, some kind of hippie here? What is that,
Yeah, it's like vodka, whiskey, cocaine. Okay.
The cocaine was
okay.
Yeah.
Like if you smelled like weed, they'd be like, ugh, are you in high school?
Yeah.
What are you doing? You have a fucking dress shirt on and you smell like you smoked a joint? Like that's like ridiculous.
And also for me, like I would, the way I used it at the time in what I thought was positive ways. Like, I would really get into music, or I'd watch something, or I couldn't really read a book while high because I would get stuck on one paragraph. But like, it wasn't for connecting with people.
Right, it was
like
for
a social thing.
Creative expression, like enhancement.
Or just zoning out,
Sure.
At the time, you alcohol was the way you would meet people. You'd go out for drinks, you'd meet people, you'd do some kind of mix or whatever. Like, if you were doing a work thing, go out with clients, that was the way you would connect with people. So there was a social quality. So I was like, well, weed doesn't really work with me for that, or it doesn't. My brain didn't connect it that way, but alcohol did. But the thing is, I was also drinking. I think I took to it immediately in a way that was, I guess I want to say quiet, but it was more like I would just drink at home too.
Was it measured?
Yes, it was. And one of the breakthroughs I had actually in recovery was realizing that I drank alcoholically, I think, from the start, by definition. By that I mean if you you're not just going to have one, you're going to covet the next one. You're already thinking about the next one. So I would start drinking. I would decide when to start drinking by like when I was going to go to bed, because I knew like I'll have. There was no happy hour for me. I was like, I'll have one and then I'll go do something else. I was like, well, once I have a beer, now I'm drinking. Now it's drinking time. The day has turned into, moved from sober to not sober. So now I'm going to start drinking, and it's just going to go until I go to sleep.
Right. So how old were you when that started noticeably happening?
Probably my mid-20s, but it seemed very stable, And again, I was living in Brooklyn. I was going out. It just seemed normal,
Yeah, you're single.
I was
right?
single. I got married later on, but you're out. You're hanging out with friends. You're going out. You're just out on the town and just seeing shows, doing stuff. Everything revolves, even now, more now in some ways, around alcohol. So it was always, and I began to notice that I would just never be in places where you kind of couldn't drink, or if I was in places where I couldn't drink, I wouldn't stay long.
Right.
I would just kind of, and again, it was happening really slowly. I tell people I was like a real slow burn. It wasn't until years later that I realized I was always in a place where alcohol was available.
So when was the first clue to you that, all right, maybe I went over the limit, or went over the line today, or like did something dramatic, did something happen?
I started to notice that I was if not the last person to leave, one of the last people to leave the bar or the party. Blackouts started coming into the picture. I probably wouldn't have called them that. It was just like, oh, what did I do that night? Who did I, then what you hear, you're like, oh.
Yeah, uneducated.
I have to call this person because I don't know what I said, make sure everything was okay. So that was probably, getting into my late 20s. Again, still gainfully employed, living life. Again, very few consequences. Never got arrested, nothing really bad happened. It was just becoming more and more of a thing. And I never was without alcohol at home. That's the other thing. I hear stories about, people would drive, I would drive through a snowstorm to get my stuff. I never had to because I always had it. It was like buying groceries.
Right.
I just always had beer, and then later on it was like, whiskey and stuff like that. So I was just good about always having a supply that I could just regularly kind of tap into on a day-to-day.
Right. So then, so what happens next?
What happens next? Well, life starts to get a little more adultish, I guess I would say. Work starts to I get more, I become...
Are you moving up at work and everything?
I'm like getting promoted, I'm getting more serious. I'm like, okay, at some point, work became a career.
Right.
At some point, I don't know when it happened, but I was like more invested in it. In my field, people work late a lot. I was spending a lot of time at work. Got married.
Where'd you meet your wife?
I actually met her online. It's funny because we lived in the same neighborhood. We had this weird parallel life. We lived in the same neighborhood, but never met each other for years and years. We both.
What neighborhood?
Park Slope.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah. We were just connected to things, and we never met. Like we both were involved in the Park Slope Food Co-op for years before meeting. We were squad leaders. For anyone who knows the co-op, being squad leader is kind of like,
Shout out Liam.
There you go.
So go ahead.
Yeah, that was serious. But yeah, we met online, and we were in our 30s at this point. She's pretty much my age, and we moved pretty quickly into like a marriage posture.
Right? Yeah, you start playing house.
Start playing house. Yeah.
Right. Sure.
So we got married, then we had kids, or we had a kid like a year and a half later, and then that's when things were, I think, started to feel more real. One thing I haven't.
Did she ever mention it to you?
Well, she drank too. She didn't drink like I did, but she drank. She could put away. She's smaller than me, but she could put away a decent amount of alcohol. Again, not in a way that seemed like she wasn't like a fall on the floor kind of. She wasn't like an extravagant drinker. She kind of drank like I did. She had a good tolerance, and it was just part of her life, just like it was part of my life.
Yeah, consistency.
We were both very consistent that way. We were steady. Again, like smoking, I was a steady smoker until I, just to talk on that. And then when I quit smoking, I quit once, and that was it. But it took a real effort to be like, all right, I need to stop identifying as a cigarette smoker, and finally did. When I was like, oh, if I can do that, and I think that's the other thing. If I could do this, I can do anything. If I can quit this, then quitting anything should be easy. So I think I didn't look at alcohol as something that was too serious because I thought, well, if I could quit smoking, and that, I was totally hooked on that, then I can quit anything. So it didn't seem like I think that made it seem like I didn't have a problem, or it wasn't heading toward a problem.
When did you realize that the problem had arrived?
Yeah. I think for that, it would probably not be until the pandemic, to be honest. Life starts to happen.
So you had one kid, you have two kids,
I have two, yeah. And, I was able to drink with the kids, I was a present dad. I had, it wasn't an option for me to not be around for the kids. Like, that was just the way we were going to work it. So I was, we both worked, so we both were sharing, the working, the caring for kids, duties. My wife, she's a great mom. She's a super attentive mom. She jumped right into it. And it was not going to be acceptable for me to be not present. So I was still present, but, I just worked alcohol into it. I think, maybe when I'm reading a story for bedtime, maybe there was a little glass of whiskey there. But I was still there. But it was just showing up in more places. Again, in terms of that, what I was saying about alcohol being socially acceptable. You go to birthday parties nowadays, especially in Park Slope, you're drinking, It's amazing how much alcohol is connected to raising kids these days.
What's amazing to me, and this is coming from somebody who was always under the influence. It doesn't mean, the blackouts and the madness and the fucking Navy SEAL wrestling with your friends in the street shit, that happens at 3 a.m. But I was always under the influence. It doesn't mean I was always drunk, but I was always under the influence.
Yeah.
So where we go to meeting, when I see the parents across the street at that fucking beer garden with their kids, and they're doing fucking pints, slamming down pints, and then kid goes in the stroller or whatever, and then they're just walking back down 7th Avenue. You know what I'm saying? And I'm on this side of the fence, I look at that and I'm like, fuck, this guy just had 7 fucking beers. You know what I'm saying? Whereas for me, a lot of times it was just ooh, just like a hum.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? And then once you cross that line, and whatever day it is, then it's all the way till I collapse. Even if it's a couple days later.
Being a parent is scary,
Sure.
I was the one, I should also mention that I was an anxious kid, and I think there was a component of anxiety that was kind of always with me.
Right.
I thought alcohol was dampening it, or certainly it was numbing it for a time, but I think, again, with the perspective I have now, it was making it way worse.
Right.
Way worse. But at the time, you mentioned people at that beer garden slamming beers. Well, because there you are with your kid, you don't know what to do. There's a lot of what we now call imposter syndrome, and I was definitely living with that too. So I identify with those guys.
I used to think, that in some ways you could think it's I always call it the costume. You have this costume. Oh, I'm a middle-aged person. This is my kid. Guess what? There's 74 other middle-aged people here who maybe love or don't like their job, or don't love or like their life, right? But this is, I guess we're in the fucking river together.
Yep.
And this is what we're doing. We're going to birthday parties, and then somebody busts out a bottle of wine, and next thing you know, 3 of the moms are feeling saucy.
Yep.
And the kids are finger painting and all. So I get it. You know what I'm saying? How it could be pervasive. In a sense.
But I knew that was actually when I started to know things were different, because after, let's say I was one of those people at the beer garden, I would think to myself, well, I can't just stop drinking now. And that was why, I wasn't a day drinker, because I knew if I started drinking at let's say at a birthday party, I would want to just keep going.
Right.
And I sort of did. That was the thing with the kids. It was once I started, it was very hard for me to cut myself off.
Right.
Once I had a few.
And you had that knowledge, you knew that truth about yourself.
Yep.
That if it's 11 in the morning, I can't, because it'll be, but at 11 at night, okay, we can ring the bell.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah. So when does it really start to make a turn for the worse for you?
Yeah. I would say the pandemic, I was, okay, so the pandemic hits 2020. My work goes to remote. I'm working from home. Everyone's stressed out. And I kind of just, at that point, I was drinking a lot if I'm being honest, I was just drinking a lot in my, at the times I would normally drink, just, and it was just increasing. At that point, it's becoming like, well, I'm here at home. And at first, like, the kids are home from school and it's just chaos. So I think everyone was just like doing what they had to. So for me, it was just like, I start drinking earlier in the day.
And you're working from home.
I'm
Zoom
working from
calls,
home.
all the other stuff.
I'm working from home.
Do you have like a book of clients, or like how does this work? Or do you guys get an assignment and then, you just have to write stuff for this particular thing?
I mean, it was a lot of meetings, to be
That's
honest.
what I'm asking.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So because like then you're doing a lot of meetings and your drinking starts getting earlier and earlier.
Yeah. And you could go off camera, and I think everyone just had license to be a little off, like, I don't know, man. It's funny. I often ask myself, how did I get here? Or how did I get there? How did I get from drinking a lot? And again, just to go back to that advertising thing, I kind of had a point of pride. Like, I can be that guy who drinks more than a lot of people, but still seems to have their shit together.
Right. Do you think you would have gotten here without the pandemic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I would have. Because, like I said,
looking back, you were on your way.
I was on my way. It just took something. I remember anytime something happened, if I had a medical issue, I would start to drink early. Like, every time something happened, it just caused me to be like, okay. I just realized that was what I went to. That was my source of comfort.
There was something inside of you looking for that out. You're like, oh, I guess.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, life gets more serious, and I was willing to. I didn't have any other tools to just let things go. All the stuff we talk about, live and let live. I had a hard time with that. I internalized everything. I internalized stress. I future tripped all the time, especially going back to being a parent. I would get freaked out. I wouldn't look at like the next day ahead of me. I would look at. It's like looking up at you ever stand at a base of a skyscraper and you look up at it. You're like, oh, that's what the future looked like. It just looked like this giant thing bearing down on me. Work was like that. I would wake up terrified of work, of whatever was going on. But I realized all that stress, you're in control of that if you want to be. But I gave that power away. I felt like the work was allowed to make me anxious all the time. And again, what was my solution to that? Well, I would just drink more at night.
Yeah, because guess what? It wouldn't have mattered if you switched jobs.
Yep.
Because the co-op will make you anxious. The food co-op will make you anxious too.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah,
well, I mean, I worked. I switched agents. It was all the same. I took my, like we say.
You took yourself with you.
I
right?
took myself with me. I didn't do a geographic, but I was like, oh, this place is no good. I got to work at this other place. Same shit. I did the same stuff. And again, I was getting away with it at work. But when the pandemic came around, I should also say, like I was just kind of in a weird place. I think I was just in a detached place in general. I think I was, I kind of went back to when I was a kid, and I would just sort of drift off mentally. I would do that. I was just feeling very, I was feeling very disgusted by the world in a lot of ways. I mean, the way the pandemic was like politicized, I was just like, wow, it just seemed like a test that we were all failing. I was like, really? We can't be good to each other. We can't help each other. Everyone was talking about how, wearing a mask was such an infringement on their liberty. Meanwhile, if you knew anyone, I knew nurses who were working in hospitals, and it was just like, I was pretty disgusted with people. And my way of handling that was to drink at them, to drink at the situation. I would just feel like I didn't want to be a part of things, which you can't do when you're a parent and you have, a family and a job. But I was just feeling I'd gotten into a bit of a nihilistic place. But again, what was my solution? My solution was to drink over it.
Yeah. Do you think in hindsight, knowing what you know now, that maybe that idea is, the way that your disease looks for something? Because even if they were complying to whatever way you believe to be okay, and everyone's allowed to believe whatever, I don't subscribe to that. But listen, I can always find an excuse to be angry, to be anxious. You know what I'm saying? Like you were talking about future tripping, and we throw that word around a lot in our life, but there are civilians that live under that pressure, and I'm like, bro, it's fucking Sunday.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But you can't tell them that it's not real, because it is real. Even if it's manufactured. So, because what I found out about myself is that it doesn't matter how I was raised. I was going to find a way, apparently, to be apart from, or to be separate from, or to be you know, to look for that justification, that license to grab those drinks. Yeah, I got to drink.
Yeah.
These people are fucking crazy. This guy's telling me to fucking don't wear the fucking mask. Or this guy's telling me, you know, remember, you guys who are young have no idea what we're about to talk about. But if you remember, remember when the year 2000 came?
Oh, yeah.
Y2K.
Y2K.
Bro.
Everybody was terrified.
Imagine alcoholics then.
Yep.
They're like, the world's going to end.
Right. Better stockpile the water.
The water, the toilet paper, the Spam, everything. Well, nobody else is doing it. Between then after that, there was another one. What was it, like the Mayan calendar?
Yeah, 2008. Or 12.
2012.
Yeah.
Exactly. So like, there's something inside of us that's like, dude, I need to give myself authority.
Yeah.
To do this, not just justification. Like, no, authority means like I think I'm right. To be like, boom. So that's what you turn that, when you turn that corner, it's getting dark, isn't it?
Yep.
So what happened?
And by that time, I had just so much practice. You know, I was such a steady, because I'd had a foundation of steady, I'm air quoting here, steady drinking. It just seemed like the natural thing to do. We'll just drink more.
What was it like with your wife?
It got bad. I mean, I'm grateful to her now, especially because she did not let me get away with it.
Oh,
you know?
beautiful.
I'm really glad.
I'd fucking hug her right now.
Yeah.
No, because like, you know, as you're describing your emotional and mental isolation, you're not a 28-year-old kid. You're a grown man with a family and with a partner. And meanwhile, you're like painting yourself into this corner. And now, boom, pandemic. I'm working from home and these people and this and that. And then you're drinking. Yeah. I can imagine the wall you were putting up to your own fucking, that's your wife.
She said I was unrecognized. I mean, she's, again, grateful. She said some hard shit. She called me on my bullshit immediately. And I, in active addiction, would not, you know, I made it worse because I wasn't even hearing it. And I think that's the disease talking. You know, like we say, it's the disease that tells you you don't have a disease.
Right.
Very few diseases function that way, which is what's so sinister about it. I was like, well, no, it's you. You're just uptight. You know, I would try to turn it around on her. Meanwhile, I was really starting to like lose time. You know, I would just fall asleep in the day. I was not there for the kids. You know, I would just, and the thing is, as you know, I mean, the kids are 8 and 10 now. So it's a couple of years ago. They notice things.
Oh,
you know?
yeah.
They notice things that adults don't notice. And they were starting to look at me like, who is this? You know, again, nothing got, you know, I didn't do anything, thankfully, thank God, I didn't do anything, you know, violent or anything like that. It was just, for me, it manifested as just being out of it.
Right.
Not there for them.
Absent.
Even when I was there, I was vacant.
No, yeah, exactly. Yeah, oof. So when does the end show up?
Finally, you know, it was, there was one play date where, you know, I was watching the kids and it was boring and I was just like, you know, at that point I was day drinking and I don't know.
Other people's kids were there too?
Yeah.
Were you in your house or you were somewhere else?
In my house. I was at home. You know, no cars were involved.
Right.
I'm not trying to let myself off the hook.
No.
And I'm just appalled at myself when I think about it, but it's like, you know, and then at a certain point, a blackout happened. I don't even know what was going on. Next thing I knew, I woke up on my sister's couch because she had, you know, long story short, my wife had become freaked out at what, you know, how just not me I was. You know, basically my sister, who luckily lives not far from me, came and get me and took me out of the house. And that was humbling, you know. Well, first it was like, what the hell's going on? I didn't even know what time it was. I didn't know what was going on when I finally woke up.
Right.
It was the middle of the night, and this was like a Sunday. And I think at that point there was no, you know, everything, the lights were on. You know, the lights were on in the theater. There was no hiding anymore.
Yeah.
There was no turning things around. There was no saying, I don't have a problem, because at that point. And it was affecting others in a way that was just like terrifying to me.
Yeah. So what happened next?
Well, I started to get help. I mean, I didn't get into Alcoholics Anonymous at first. I tried a couple other approaches, which were fine, but for me, didn't have the accountability. I think for me, I just wasn't able to make, even though in the moment I was like, there's a problem, I have to get back. I was still able to somehow compartmentalize. Like, I can get back to where I was. You know, I wouldn't have said, oh, I always drank alcoholically. You know, I wasn't ready to admit that. And so there was relapse, basically, long story short.
For how long?
Let's see, this was for about a year, when you think about it. Well, no, I should say, for about 6 months, and then I finally, you know, there were a couple, you know, the relapses were happening, then I finally, through a friend, actually a friend of my sister, who's in the program, took me to a meeting. And
now, when you were relapsing, how did you feel after each relapse?
I felt terrible, you know.
Right.
And I'm glad I felt terrible.
Yeah.
It's weird. It was like something I put on the shelf. It was like, I'll get, you know, I can procrastinate a lot. And it was almost like, well, I know what to do. At that point, I was already starting to get into some of the literature, but I can get to it. It wasn't like the urgency wasn't there.
Right.
And so, I think I was somehow able to make it acceptable in my mind, that I didn't need to change my life right then and there. So with each relapse, I said I wouldn't do it again, and I meant it. I felt guilty. I was beginning to feel more and more powerless. I think the first step started to become clearer and clearer to me.
Right, but in the moment, you mean those thoughts.
Yeah.
And those promises. So it's not like
I
we're
was
liars.
serious.
You mean it in that moment, but you have no defense for when the tide comes back in.
Yep. And, you know, then you start like looking for ways to get away with it. And that, you know, once you start in that, I mean, again, I'm thankful that in retrospect didn't go on that long. I mean, it went on, I mean, any amount of time was too long, but it didn't, you know, went on for a few months. But, you know, I could just see where it was going, you know, and in the end, just my work was, you know, things were starting to get, not great at work. It was becoming apparent. I was becoming unreliable, which was something I always prided myself on, was being steady and reliable. Whatever was going on in my life, didn't let it affect my work or my or my relationships, friendships. It became noticeable that I was not me all the time. I think that's what it was. Some days I was me, and some days I was a very lesser version of me.
Yeah, so your sister's friend brings you to meetings.
Yep.
What do you feel?
I felt great. First meeting I went to, I felt magical. It was amazing, but
it is magic. It is magic.
I walked into that room, and you know, I was, you know, immediately, you know, once I told them it was my, you know, one day, they're coming at me with phone numbers, and everyone's like picking me up like I just scored the winning goal in a soccer game, and you know, I felt super welcome. I felt the program all around me, and I'm like, this is awesome, and yet. And I was into it for, you know, I think maybe I lasted a month. I didn't have a sponsor yet, I should say. So I think I just wasn't held to account. I wasn't holding myself accountable. I was letting myself get away with it, which is something I'm still sort of coming to terms with. What is it about me that will allow myself to, even knowing what the stakes are, even the prospect of losing everything, I'll still mentally want to do what I can't do.
Sounds like Atlantic City to me. You're asking.
I got a gambling mind.
Yeah, no, it's like, hey, people, places, and things. Yeah. So when did you? So you completely surrender.
Yep.
In the sense that you're like, okay, surrendering to those who are out there, saying like, okay, that just means I'm gonna give this other thing a try, like an honest try, you know.
Yep.
And then you start putting some time together. How do you feel?
How do I feel now? I feel amazing. And I don't want to say that like Pink Cloud style, because it's been a year. Just celebrated my year, and woo!
Hold on, let me hit this button.
Yep. Oh yeah, keep it coming. Yeah, me. That's the thing. It's not about me. I think a lot of it was like getting away from myself. And the funny thing about being self-absorbed is sometimes you can think you're not. You know, you can think you're not self-absorbed, but every thought you have is all about yourself.
Right. I call that, because I have this issue with one of my kids, and it's just because they're young. I don't even think it's self-absorbed, but it's like literally when the literature says self-centered, like it's not somebody who's selfish who's like, oh, I'm making a choice to make it about me. Being self-centered means like you do not yet know how to not make it about you.
Right.
Like you don't have that tool.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? Like it's just like, it's not even a thought. You're not like, oh, well, fuck them. You're just like, I guess we're out of toilet paper, and I'm going to, but I wiped my ass. I'm going to keep going. Like, you don't even think like that.
Right.
You just, somebody else shows up and there's no toilet paper. And like, bro, you couldn't fucking change it.
Right.
And it's just because they're young. And there's a lot of people who grow out of that. But for us, that's like it's like a stigmata that we carry with us, that you're like, oh my God, if I have been this self-centered about this thing, where else in my life? Because I have a history, and I'm more than capable for the rest of my life of being blind to something that was freaking killing me spiritually, robbing my family of my best self, and all these other, lofty things. Mm-hmm. But I have something inside me that can let me be blind to shit that is not going good.
Yep.
And it's that self-realization that you're like, holy shit, it's not just about drinking.
Oh, no. That's why, I love the steps, because I love, and one of the reasons why is because the first step, because the word alcohol is mentioned exactly once. And that alone made me like, yeah, it's about so much more than that. And I think I was, knowing that there are things to fix was attractive to me. Like, oh, something else is, I think I was able to accept that it's not just this behavior. It's something deeper. It's a way of looking at the world. It's a way of not looking, of hiding from things. It's a way of how I treat people, and how I conduct myself in the world.
What was that like for you when you learned that? Obviously you have a sponsor and all this stuff. You have people who are like showing you the way.
Yeah, and I'm active in the community, not just meetings. I do service. The closer I get to the community, the more I listen, the more I'm filled with gratitude. And I know that sounds, even when I say that, it sounds almost, there's a part of my mind that says that's cheesy, or that's, you're committing to something. Again, it goes against my nature of wanting to be apart from things. Here I am, jumping into a community. But the idea of joining a community of people who are all interested in other people and interested in helping other people is an amazing feeling. And just immersing myself in that, the rewards were immediate. Obviously we all feel better once we stop poisoning ourselves physically, but psychologically, spiritually, I started just to feel part of something. And I felt, and whenever I hear from someone that I'm a part of their recovery, that means an incredible amount to me. I love it. I love hearing that.
What does your wife think?
Well, she's happy to have me back. She's happy. She has embraced my recovery. She works her own program. I think because she doesn't allow me to get away with things.
She go to like Al-Anon or something?
Yeah.
Oh, good for her.
It's great. And that's allowed her to, again, that's been her gateway to working on her own stuff.
Of course. Listen, we traumatize everyone. Everyone.
Yep.
So that's important. Wow, good for her.
No, again, it's been her gateway into a community of people that she wouldn't have known otherwise. And just, getting out of her head has been the same as getting out of my head.
Right.
In the sense of seeing myself the way other people see me, understanding my real motivations, just cutting out my own bullshit. Because, hey, again, you work in advertising, you become a pretty good bullshitter. And, I can bullshit myself. And I think it took me some time to realize how much I was bullshitting myself.
Right. So what about you? Do you believe changed the most? What was the most surprising change?
I think I just kind of, that's a great question. In some ways, everything has changed. I think my ability to kind of not be rattled by life. It's funny because I gave the impression of being steady, but I was not steady.
Good poker face.
In my head, yeah, it's a poker face.
Atlantic City.
Yep. I would wake up, like I said, in a state of anxiety, and I have lots of highs and lows. I get really excited about things, then I get really unexcited about things. I'm psychologically, I go to extremes. I think I'm able to sort of be less of that in the world. We'll let things wash over me. I don't look at the future like some skyscraper that's enormous that's about to fall on me. I am able to look at things to the next step ahead and let things happen, not try to control things. And just, I feel like I'm moving through the world with much more ease. I think that might be the word, ease.
Yeah. What about your relationship with your parents?
Well, I've yet to get into my amends, but I'm realizing
where you are now in the steps.
I'm in 8.
Oh man, you made the list. Made a list of all the people we had harmed and became willing to make amends to them all.
Yep, and I actually just had a really eye-opening conversation with my sponsor and my sponsor's sponsor.
Oh man, what they try to double team you?
Yeah, fuck, came at me, man. No, it was awesome. And we talked about my 8th step, and I did a first draft of writing it out, and just like a great editor. He, my sponsor just helped me cut. I realize even now, there was so much wiggle language in the way I wrote it out. I was still, and this is like kind of, again, an eye-opening thing. I was kind of, if not bullshitting myself, I was, I don't know what the word is. I was kind of, just creating wiggle room between all the ways that I had harmed people. Maybe I did that. They might have felt it. A lot of
my sponsor, we call that the vagueness.
Yeah, the vagueness.
Yeah, you're just like, it's almost like, like everybody's my friend. It's like that. You're just like, oh. Yeah. But it's like, no, you need to be precise.
Yeah. And looking at things, like, look at yourself. Look at this truth about yourself.
Because if you're precise, guess what? Some of these motherfuckers don't get an amends.
Yeah.
But if you're vague, it'll haunt you.
Yep. With my parents, I mean, the good thing is I think, they're good parents. We disagree about things. And I realize I've been a bit of a shit to them, in some ways. I mean, it never got, I never stole money from them. I never did that kind of stuff to them. But I think on an emotional level, I owe them a lot. I think we talked a little bit about the trauma of, the Holocaust and things like that. That's something you have to realize is such a part of a person's mind. And you can't roll your eyes at that. And I think in a lot of ways I did for a long time. I didn't really take
not allowing people, even if you're doing it internally, but most obviously sometimes bad externally, like not giving people the space to be who they are.
Mm-hmm. Identifying. That's what it is. Identifying, not comparing. I compare all the time. I judge stuff.
Which is fine, but you still have to give them that space. I used to brush things off like, dude, my mom didn't have electricity till she was 8 years old. She grew up in Puerto Rico, and my dad's family, Jews from Europe. Where I'm like, you guys got me the wrong fucking bike. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Me. It's about me, my bike.
That I didn't even now, especially because they're older, my mom's 79, my dad's like 75. Like, it's now that I'm, they're from a different world, period, My mom went from, like, not having electricity till she was 8 to coming here to the mainland, to America, or whatever you want to call it. And she's fucking shopping for iPhones.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah. In one lifetime.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So if she's stuck in some ways in her mind in 1964 or 1954, dog, I gotta let that be how it is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
But I never allowed anybody that grace. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I learned doing the steps, that I was like, whatever you went through doesn't, apparently, the way I behaved, even if I just thought this way, it didn't matter.
Yeah. What
mattered was me, you, right now, this, that's it. And I learned how to give people that space.
Mm-hmm. And also just respecting just the suffering that they're in by not knowing what's going on. I mean, now that as a parent now, watching kids grow up, I mean, they're still young enough that they haven't really started to go crazy yet, but I can't even imagine how I'll feel, not knowing what's going on with them. Maybe someone has a problem and I'm hoping that she'll be okay. I don't know yet. Just the fact that my parents were aware of this sort of thing, and I didn't really tell them what was up. I didn't really connect with them. And they were just left, they're worriers in the first place. They were left to worry, and I don't think I really helped that. If anything, I made it worse by if not mocking it, by sort of dismissing it, by the eye roll, and just not giving them the respect to feel the way they feel.
Yeah, and just know that your kids are going to do that to you.
They are.
Because that's just what kids do. They're like, It's the reason why the diary was like invented
Yeah.
or whatever for like little kids, so they can, bro, that, you know, being a parent, being a sober dad is a very, you know, you're going to be introduced to things that people who don't have kids are not introduced to. That you'll be like, hey, listen, I can't just be browbeating these kids because I know what's right. Like, save your money, or like whatever they decide to think in those moments, to just not be dismissive. I had to learn that.
Yeah.
It wasn't innate. I was like, you know, like that kind of thought process of being that, I'm not going to say selfless, of being that empathetic.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't put to use in that way. You know, like my son left college in the middle of fucking college, like in his second year at SVA. And I was like, yeah, somebody hired me to be creative something manager at a clothing store on the Lower East Side, and they're going to pay me $500 a week. That was the whole conversation.
Right.
And I left school, Dad. I'm like, are you fucking crazy right now? Like, yeah, you know what I'm saying? But like, without calling him impulsively a fucking moron. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, dude, 2 more years, and like whatever. Like, just to be able to communicate in a more effective way, but still stay true to like my values.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and just say, hey, listen, the fact no one's saying you can or can't do anything in your life.
Right.
Is what I tell my kids. I tell them, all 3 of these fucking guys. I tell them all. I say, listen, I never tell you who to be. I'm telling you how to be. How to be is do your best.
Yep.
And do your best also to ask for help and not just like ring the alarm. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the house is burning down and it's like, beep, like try to slow that down a little bit, even though that they grow into that a little bit at a time, because like, you know, who doesn't want independence? Right. Exactly. And all these kids want independence, and I know, but then like, you know, to be like, hey, listen, to understand that that's just part of the process. Yeah, man, they're going to lie. They're
going to lie. They're going to do things. They're going to do things I hate. They already do. But even now I'm already seeing just how a sober mind handles these things better.
Right. That's what I mean. Where it's just like, you know, I used to tell the little one, well, the middle one and my son used to be like, we just don't tell you every time we know you're lying. Like one time I got so fed up with like the most absurd lie that, you know, because I know what it's like to be a liar, being an alcoholic.
Yep.
I know what it's like to be a liar. And so I can smell it. I'm like, oh, I'm going to tell this vague lie that cannot be proven or disproven. And if you call me a liar, I'm going to get mad that you even called me a liar. Like all that whole circle thing, you know, that was my life.
There's a lot of ways to lie.
Yeah, but just be real with yourself is the most, it's the hardest thing, you know, because then I tell my kids, look, you be real with yourself as best you can, then you can change who you are.
Yeah.
You can change anything, you know?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Well, that to that point, that every time I speak, I find myself remarking on change. Just as I'm thinking about your earlier question about what's the best thing about sobriety. Just watching change, like being able to change, just knowing that you can change is amazing. You know, I have a tendency to get cynical and pessimistic about things, but just knowing that I can change means you can change. You know, and you know.
Sounds like Rocky.
You know what? I'm
Rocky
still mourning the death of Carl Weathers.
Carl Weathers. Yeah, that was funny. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up. Look, Eli, it was great. Don't forget, everybody, like and subscribe on all podcast platforms, Google, everywhere, Spotify, Apple. You know, we're doing pretty good. Last thing congratulations, you made a year.
1 year. Just another day, though.
No, don't say that. Listen, there's people who can't even get one day.
Yeah.
And a lot of us don't even make it. But the hard truth that I'll tell you from my experience is that it's easier to get 1 year than to stick around for 2.
Okay.
Because in 1 year you're dusting yourself off and like you can almost go on autopilot. Second year, third year, you got to make some choices about who you really want to be.
Yeah.
You know? But I can't wait to see it happen.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. All right, guys. We'll see you on the flip side. Have a great night. Peace. Thank you for joining us on The Sober Experience. Please don't forget to like and subscribe on all podcast platforms, as well as share some of these episodes with the rest of your family and friends. We'll see you around.